A desperate knock shattered the silence of Jacob Mercer's isolated Wyoming ranch at 3 a.m., revealing a rain-soaked young woman clutching a baby who whispered, "You seem familiar," before collapsing into his arms. When she revealed herself as the daughter of his long-lost first love, carrying secrets that would bring deadly bounty hunters to his door, Jacob faced a choice that would either destroy his carefully guarded solitude or give him the family he never knew he still needed. But why did her infant son bear such a striking resemblance to Jacob himself? A wolf's howl cut through the frozen night like a blade, making Jacob Mercer's hand freeze over his coffee cup. The sound came from the canyon below his ranch house, where shadows danced between twisted pine trees under a cold November moon. Something was wrong. Wolves didn't hunt alone this close to winter. Jacob pushed back from his wooden table, his boots creaking on the old floorboards. The year was 1867, and his small ranch sat on the edge of Wyoming territory, where the nearest neighbor lived a full day's ride away. He'd chosen this lonely spot on purpose, wanting nothing more than to be left alone with his grief and his memories. The oil lamp on his table flickered, casting moving shadows on the log walls. Outside, wind whistled through the gaps in the shutters, carrying the smell of coming snow. Jacob walked to the window and peered through a crack in the wood. The yard lay empty except for his old horse stamping nervously in the corral. 3 years had passed since fever took his wife Mary and their baby daughter. 3 long years of eating cold beans straight from the can and talking only to his horse. His beard had grown wild and gray, and his clothes hung loose on his thin frame. Most days he forgot what his own voice sounded like. The brass clock on the stone fireplace ticked loud in the silence. Jacob counted the hours until dawn. Still many left to go. Sleep never came easy anymore. When he closed his eyes, he saw Mary's face growing pale, heard his daughter's last weak cry. Better to stay awake and keep the ghosts at bay. He picked up the cracked photograph from the table, the only picture he had of his family. Mary held their baby girl, both of them smiling at something outside the camera's view. Jacob's thumb had worn smooth the corner where he always touched Mary's face. Sometimes he wondered if he was losing his mind out here in the wilderness, with only memories for company. A branch cracked somewhere in the darkness beyond his yard. Jacob's hand moved to the gun belt hanging on a nail by the door. Living alone meant staying ready for trouble, whether it came in the form of hungry bears, cattle thieves, or worse. He'd learned that lesson the hard way when bandits had tried to rob his place last spring. The wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending something metal clanging in the distance. Probably just a loose bucket rolling around the yard. Still, Jacob felt his shoulders tense. Years of frontier living had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming that something wasn't right. He poured another cup of coffee from the pot on the wood stove, trying to warm his hands around the hot metal. The coffee tasted bitter and old. He'd made it that morning and kept reheating it all day. Food had lost most of its flavor since Mary died. Everything tasted like dust and regret. Thunder rumbled overhead, though no lightning flashed. That meant snow was coming, probably before sunrise. Jacob needed to check on his horse and make sure the animal had enough hay to last the storm. He pulled on his heavy coat and picked up the lantern from the table. As he reached for the door handle, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the small house. Jacob froze, his blood turning to ice water in his veins. Nobody traveled these canyon roads at night, especially not in November when storms could kill a man in minutes. The knocks came again, softer this time, almost begging. "Hello?" A woman's voice called through the thick wooden door. "Please, I need help." Jacob's hand stayed frozen on the door handle. In 3 years of living alone, nobody had ever knocked on his door after dark. His nearest neighbor, old Pete Morrison, would have called out his name by now. This voice belonged to a stranger, a young woman by the sound of it. "Step away from the door," Jacob called back, his voice rough from lack of use. He grabbed his pistol from the gun belt and checked that it was loaded. "Who are you and what do you want?" "My name is Anna," the voice replied, shaking with cold or fear. "I'm lost and my baby is sick. We need shelter from the storm." "Baby." The word hit Jacob like a punch to the stomach. He hadn't seen a child since his own daughter died. Slowly, he moved to the window and peered through the shutters again. In the pale moonlight, he could make out a figure huddled against his door, a young woman in a torn dress, holding something wrapped in blankets. Rain started falling, turning quickly to sleet that pinged against the glass. The woman pressed closer to the door, trying to protect whatever she carried from the weather. Jacob watched her for a long moment, his mind racing. This could be a trick. Bandits sometimes used women and children to make people lower their guard. But the storm was real, and if she really had a baby out there— "Are you alone?" Jacob asked through the door. "Yes," she answered quickly. "Just me and my son. Please, he's so cold." Jacob took a deep breath and slowly unlatched the heavy wooden bar that secured his door. He opened it just a crack, keeping his gun ready. The woman looked up at him with desperate eyes, and Jacob felt his world tilt sideways. Even wet and shivering, even older than when he'd last seen her, those eyes were unmistakable. But that was impossible. Rebecca Sullivan had vanished 15 years ago, pregnant and scared, leaving only a letter saying goodbye. She'd be older now, in her 30s, not this young woman who couldn't be more than 20. "You seem familiar," the woman whispered, studying his face through the narrow opening. "Have we met before?" The words hung in the cold air between them like smoke from a dying fire. Jacob stared at the young woman's face, his mind spinning back through the years to memories he'd buried deep. Those eyes, gray as storm clouds, belonged to someone he'd loved long before he met Mary. "I don't think so," Jacob lied, though his voice shook. He opened the door wider, unable to ignore the baby's weak crying. "Come inside before you both freeze." The woman stumbled across the threshold, and Jacob caught her arm to steady her. She was soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her head, her lips blue with cold. The bundle in her arms moved, and Jacob glimpsed a tiny face peeking out from wet blankets. "Thank you," she breathed, her teeth chattering. "I didn't think anyone lived out here." Jacob bolted the door behind them and set his gun on the nearby shelf. The woman stood dripping on his floor, looking around the small room with curious eyes. She seemed to be searching for something, though Jacob couldn't guess what. "Sit by the fire," he said, pointing to the wooden chair closest to the stone hearth. "I'll get you some dry clothes and something hot to drink." He busied himself adding wood to the fire and putting water on to boil, stealing glances at his unexpected guests. The baby had stopped crying and was now looking around with bright, alert eyes. Something about the child's face tugged at Jacob's memory, though he couldn't place what. "My name is Anna," the woman said again, unwrapping the baby from his wet blankets. "Anna Sullivan." The cup Jacob was holding slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. Sullivan. The name hit him like lightning, confirming what his heart had already suspected. Rebecca Sullivan. His first love, the minister's daughter who'd run away pregnant all those years ago. "Sullivan," Jacob repeated slowly, sweeping up the broken pieces with shaking hands. "That's not a common name around these parts." Anna watched him carefully, as if weighing how much to reveal. "My mother was Rebecca Sullivan. She came from Kansas, but she died when I was born." She paused, then added quietly, "She used to tell me stories about a man named Jacob who lived on a ranch somewhere in Wyoming. She said he was the kindest man she'd ever known." Jacob's legs felt weak. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself, his mind reeling with the implications. This young woman was Rebecca's daughter, which meant she was also his. The timing was right, and now that he looked closer, he could see his own features mixed with Rebecca's in Anna's face. "She talked about me?" Jacob asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "All the time," Anna replied, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "She said you were the only man who ever truly loved her, and that leaving you was the biggest mistake of her life. She kept a picture of you in a locket until the day she died." The room fell silent except for the crackling fire and the baby's soft breathing. Jacob sank into the chair across from Anna, trying to process everything she'd told him. Rebecca was dead. He had a daughter he'd never known about, and now that daughter sat in his house with a child of her own. "Why did you come looking for me?" Jacob asked finally. Anna shifted the baby to her other arm, and Jacob noticed how naturally she held him, how the child seemed content in her embrace. I found my mother's letters after the woman who raised me died. She'd written down everything she remembered about you. Your name, this general area, even what you looked like. Anna smiled sadly. She said you had kind eyes and gentle hands. Jacob looked down at his hands, scarred from ranch work, calloused from years of hard labor. He'd never thought of them as gentle, but Mary used to say the same thing when he held their daughter. How did you find this place exactly? He asked. I've been searching for weeks, Anna admitted. I started in Cheyenne and worked my way out, asking at every ranch and settlement. Most people said they'd never heard of you, but an old man in Canyon Creek said he thought a Jacob Mercer lived somewhere up in these hills. Pete Morrison, Jacob realized. His nearest neighbor must have pointed her in the right direction. Pete was one of the few people who knew Jacob's full name. It's dangerous traveling alone with a baby, Jacob said, glancing at the child. Especially this time of year. Anna's face hardened. I didn't have much choice. Samuel's father. She trailed off as if deciding how much to share. Let's just say he made it clear we weren't welcome anymore. Samuel. Jacob studied the baby more closely, noting the shape of his nose, the set of his tiny jaw. There was something familiar about those features too, though he couldn't quite place it. How old is he? Jacob asked. 6 months, Anna replied, then added quietly. His father was a married man. When his wife found out about us, she demanded he choose. He chose his reputation over his son. Jacob felt a surge of anger toward this unknown man who'd abandoned his own child. No matter what mistakes had been made, a baby deserved better than that. So you decided to come find me instead, Jacob said. Anna nodded. I thought maybe you'd want to know about my mother, about what happened to her after she left Kansas. She looked around the sparse room, taking in the single plate on the table, the lone chair by the fire. I can see you're used to being alone. We don't have to stay long. But even as she said it, Jacob could see she had nowhere else to go. Her dress was worn thin, her shoes were falling apart, and she carried no bags or supplies. She'd spent everything she had searching for him. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the shutters and sending sleet against the windows. The storm was getting worse, and even if Anna wanted to leave, she couldn't travel in this weather. They were stuck together at least until morning. Jacob stood and walked to an old trunk in the corner of the room. Inside, beneath layers of Mary's carefully folded clothes, he found what he was looking for. A small tintype photograph he'd forgotten he still owned. It showed him and Rebecca at a church social in Kansas, both of them young and laughing. He handed the picture to Anna, who gasped when she saw it. That's her? Anna whispered, tracing her mother's face with one finger. That's exactly how I remember her. As Anna studied the photograph, baby Samuel began to fuss. She stood and walked toward the window, bouncing him gently and humming a soft tune. The melody was hauntingly familiar, and Jacob realized it was the same song Rebecca used to sing when they walked together in her father's garden. A sudden banging sound came from outside. Not knocking this time, but something heavy hitting the side of the house. Jacob grabbed his gun and moved to the window, peering through the shutters into the stormy darkness. 3 men on horseback sat in his yard, their faces hidden by wide-brimmed hats. The leader raised his hand and called out in a voice that cut through the wind like a knife. We know you're in there, Anna. Come out now and we'll make this easy on everyone. Anna went pale, clutching Samuel tighter to her chest. Oh no, she whispered. They found us. Blood pounded in Jacob's ears as he watched the 3 riders circle his house like wolves around a wounded deer. Their leader sat tall in his saddle, a rifle balanced across his lap, while his companions spread out to block any escape routes. These weren't random drifters, they'd come here with a purpose. Anna Murphy, the leader shouted again, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. We're here on behalf of Marcus Whitfield. He wants his son back, and he's prepared to pay well for your cooperation. Jacob turned to Anna, who had gone white as fresh snow. Her hands trembled as she held baby Samuel, and tears streamed down her face. "Whitfield," she whispered. "That's Samuel's father. I thought we'd lost them in Denver." "How did they track you here?" Jacob asked, keeping his voice low while his eyes stayed fixed on the men outside. "I don't know," Anna replied, her voice breaking. "I was so careful. I never used my real name, never stayed in one place too long." She looked down at Samuel, who had started crying again, sensing his mother's fear. He must have hired professional trackers. The sound of boots on wooden steps told Jacob that at least one of the men had dismounted. Heavy footsteps crossed his porch, and then came 3 sharp knocks on the door, nothing like Anna's desperate tapping from earlier. "This is Deputy Marshal Tom Crawford," the voice called out, though something in its tone made Jacob doubt the claim. "We have legal papers giving Mr. Whitfield custody of his son. Open up and nobody gets hurt." Jacob had heard enough false authority in his time to recognize it now. Real lawmen identified themselves properly and showed their badges before making demands. These were hired guns, nothing more. "Anna," Jacob said quietly, "take Samuel and get in the back room. Close the door and don't come out no matter what you hear." "I won't leave you to face them alone," Anna protested. "This isn't about being brave," Jacob replied, checking his rifle to make sure it was loaded. "It's about keeping that baby safe. If something happens to me, there's a loose board under the window in the back room. You can crawl out and head for the canyon. Follow the creek downstream. It'll take you to Pete Morrison's place." Anna stared at him with wide eyes. "Why are you helping us? You barely know me." Jacob looked at her, really looked at her, and saw Rebecca's courage mixed with his own stubborn streak. "Because you're family," he said simply. "And family protects family." The admission hung between them for a moment before another round of pounding interrupted. "Last chance," the fake deputy called. "We're coming in whether you cooperate or not." Anna grabbed Jacob's arm. "There's something else you need to know," she said urgently. "About Samuel's father. Marcus Whitfield isn't just some rich man having an affair. He's running for territorial governor, and his wife threatened to ruin him if she found out about the baby. That's why he threw us out. But now his opponents are using our existence against him anyway." Jacob felt pieces clicking together in his mind. "So he figures if he gets the boy back and controls the situation, he can spin it however he wants," Anna finished. "Maybe claim he's being a responsible father, or that I was trying to blackmail him. Either way, I lose Samuel forever." A crash from the front of the house made them both jump. The men had started breaking down the door rather than wait for an answer. With splintered and hinges groaned under the assault. "Go," Jacob ordered, pushing Anna toward the back room. "Now." Anna hesitated for one more second, then surprised Jacob by standing on her toes and kissing his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything my mother said you were." She disappeared into the back room just as the front door exploded inward. 3 men burst through, their guns drawn and ready. The leader was younger than his voice had suggested, maybe 30, with cold blue eyes and a scar running from his left ear to his jaw. His companions looked like typical hired muscle, the kind of men who solved problems with bullets. "Where is she?" the scarred man demanded, his gaze sweeping the small room. Jacob stood his ground near the fireplace, his rifle held casually but ready. "Don't know what you're talking about," he said calmly. The man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Old man, we tracked her straight to your door. Her horse is in your corral, and we can hear the baby crying in the back room. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Funny thing about that," Jacob replied, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "This is my land, and you're trespassing. I don't care what papers you claim to have, real or fake. You've got no right to break down my door." One of the other men, a heavy-set bruiser with tobacco-stained teeth, spat on Jacob's floor. "This old coot's protecting them, Crawford. Let me handle him." Crawford held up a hand. "Easy, Briggs. Let's keep this civilized." He turned back to Jacob with a cold smile. "Mr. Mercer," Jacob said, seeing no point in hiding it now. Mr. Mercer, I understand your desire to help a lady in distress. Very noble. But you're interfering with family business. Marcus Whitfield just wants his son back. Surely you can understand a father's concern. Jacob thought about the baby's frightened crying, about Anna's desperation, about the kind of man who would send armed thugs after his own child. If he's so concerned about being a father, why didn't he marry the mother? Crawford's smile turned nasty. That's not your concern, old man. All you need to know is that we're taking the woman and child with us, one way or another. You can make it easy on yourself by stepping aside. And if I don't? The third man, who had been silent until now, shifted his weight and let his hand rest on his gun. Then we'll have to convince you, he said in a voice like gravel. Jacob had been in enough fights to recognize the moment when talking stopped and shooting started. He could see it in their eyes, in the way they positioned themselves around his small room. These men had come prepared for violence, maybe even hoped for it. But as he faced them down, Jacob felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. A reason to fight that went beyond just staying alive. Anna and Samuel were counting on him. Rebecca's daughter and grandson needed him to be the man she'd remembered, the one she'd told stories about. Well then, Jacob said, raising his rifle slightly, I reckon you boys picked the wrong house to break into. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Outside, thunder rumbled across the canyon, and Jacob could hear his old horse nickering nervously in the corral. Inside the small room, 4 men faced each other with the weight of violence hanging between them like smoke. Crawford's hand moved toward his gun, and Jacob knew the talking was over. The first gunshot shattered the oil lamp on Jacob's table, plunging half the room into dancing shadows. Jacob dove behind his overturned kitchen table as splinters exploded from the wood around him. His rifle clutched tight against his chest. The smell of gunpowder and burning oil filled the small space. Get the woman! Crawford shouted over the ringing echoes. Briggs, check the back room. Jacob rolled to his left and came up firing, his bullet catching the big man called Briggs in the shoulder and spinning him around like a child's top. Briggs crashed into the wall, knocking down Mary's wedding picture and sending glass scattering across the floor. The third gunman, a wiry man with nervous eyes, fired twice in rapid succession, both shots going wide but close enough to make Jacob duck. In that split second, Crawford moved toward the back room where Anna and Samuel were hiding. Not today, Jacob muttered, levering another round into his rifle's chamber. He stood and fired in one smooth motion, the bullet taking Crawford high in the chest and dropping him to his knees. The man looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt with surprise, as if he couldn't believe someone had actually shot him. From the back room came the sound of splintering wood and Anna's scream. The nervous gunman had found the window Anna was supposed to escape through and was trying to break in from outside. Jacob could hear Samuel crying louder now, a sound that cut through him like a knife. Briggs was back on his feet despite his wounded shoulder, fumbling for his dropped pistol with his good hand. Blood soaked his shirt sleeve, but his eyes burned with rage and pain. You killed Crawford, you old fool, he snarled. Not yet, I didn't, Jacob replied, seeing that the scarred man was still breathing, though barely. But the night's young. The back room door burst open and Anna stumbled out, holding Samuel tight against her chest. Her dress was torn and she had a cut on her cheek, but she looked more angry than scared now. He was climbing through the window, she gasped. I hit him with the wash basin, but he'll be back. Jacob felt a surge of pride. Rebecca's daughter had her mother's fire, and his own refusal to back down. Can you shoot? He asked, nodding toward his pistol hanging on the wall. My mother taught me, Anna replied, her jaw set with determination. Said a woman on the frontier needed to know how to protect herself. Smart woman, Jacob thought, remembering how Rebecca had always been practical about such things. He tossed Anna his sidearm while keeping his rifle trained on Briggs, who was still trying to get his bearings. A crash from the back room told them the third gunman had made it inside. Jacob heard boots on the wooden floor, moving carefully through the darkness toward them. They were caught between 2 enemies now, with limited ammunition and nowhere to run. Anna, Jacob said quietly, When I count to 3, I want you to take Samuel and run for the front door. Don't stop for anything. What about you? I'll be right behind you, Jacob lied, knowing he needed to buy them time to escape. But before he could start counting, everything changed. The nervous gunman appeared in the doorway behind Anna, his face bloody from where she'd hit him with the wash basin. He had his gun pointed straight at baby Samuel. "Drop your weapons," he ordered, his voice shaking with pain and fury. "Both of you, or I'll shoot the kid first." Jacob felt his blood turn to ice. He'd faced down hostile Indians, angry bears, and every kind of frontier danger, but he'd never had to choose between his own life and a helpless child's. The rifle felt impossibly heavy in his hands. "You wouldn't shoot a baby," Anna said, though her voice betrayed her fear. The gunman laughed, a harsh sound like breaking bones. "Lady, Mr. Whitfield is paying us enough to retire on. You think I care about one brat?" Jacob slowly lowered his rifle, his mind racing for options. He could try to rush the man, but not before he could pull the trigger. He could attempt to negotiate, but these weren't reasonable men. They were killers, pure and simple. "That's better," Briggs said, finally managing to pick up his pistol with his left hand. "Now we can finish this properly." But as he spoke, Jacob noticed something the others had missed. Crawford, bleeding on the floor behind the overturned table, was still moving. The scarred man's hand was creeping toward a small derringer he'd kept hidden in his boot. His eyes met Jacob's for just a moment, and Jacob saw something unexpected there. Not hatred, but a kind of professional respect. Crawford was going to try something, and Jacob realized he had to be ready to move when it happened. He shifted his weight slightly, preparing to dive for cover while Anna could escape with Samuel. "You know what your problem is, old man?" Briggs continued, unaware of what was happening behind him. "You picked the wrong side. Should have minded your own business." "Maybe," Jacob replied, his eyes still watching Crawford's slow movements. "But a man's got to stand for something, or he'll fall for anything." Crawford's hand closed around the derringer's grip. His breathing was labored and blood flecked his lips, but his eyes were clear and focused. Jacob tensed, ready to move. The scarred man suddenly rolled to his side and fired the small gun at his own partner's back. The nervous gunman jerked and spun around, his shot going wild and punching a hole in the ceiling. In that instant of confusion, Jacob lunged forward and tackled Briggs, both men crashing to the floor in a tangle of arms and legs. "Go!" Jacob shouted to Anna as he wrestled for control of Briggs' pistol. "Get out of here!" Anna ran for the door, clutching Samuel, but stopped when she reached Crawford's prone form. The scarred man looked up at her with fading eyes and whispered something Jacob couldn't hear. Then Anna was gone, disappeared into the stormy night with her son. Jacob managed to get his hands on Briggs' gun and twisted it away from both of them. The big man was strong despite his wounded shoulder, but Jacob had desperation on his side. They rolled across the floor, knocking over chairs and scattering the remains of the broken lamp. "Why?" Jacob gasped, finally getting the upper hand. "Why help us?" Crawford, who was clearly dying now, managed a weak smile. "Had a kid once," he wheezed. "Little girl. Whitfield's kind. They took her too. Thought maybe this evens things out." The fight went out of Briggs when he realized his leader was gone and his partner was down. Jacob stood slowly, both guns trained on the remaining gunman, his whole body aching from the struggle. "It's over," Jacob said. "Your boss is dead, your friend's not getting up, and the woman and child are long gone. Time for you to ride out of here." Briggs clutched his bleeding shoulder, his face twisted with pain and defeat. "This ain't finished," he snarled. "Whitfield's got more men. He'll send others." "Then I'll be waiting," Jacob replied calmly. As Briggs stumbled out into the storm, Jacob knelt beside Crawford's still form. The man had died with his eyes open, staring at something only he could see. Jacob closed them gently, wondering what kind of life had led someone to sell his gun to men like Whitfield, and what had made him change his mind at the last moment. But there was no time for reflection now. Anna and Samuel were out there in the storm, and Jacob had to find them before someone else did. Anna's bare feet slipped on the wet rocks as she stumbled down the canyon path. Baby Samuel pressed against her chest like a shield against the howling wind. Behind her, gunshots still echoed from Jacob's house, each one making her heart jump with fear for the man who had risked everything to protect them. The storm had turned vicious, with sleet cutting through her thin dress and mud sucking at her shoes until she'd abandoned them completely. Samuel cried weakly, his small body shivering despite the blankets wrapped around him. Anna knew they wouldn't survive long in this weather, but going back meant walking into the arms of Whitfield's men. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the treacherous path ahead. Anna could barely make out the creek Jacob had mentioned, its waters swollen and angry from the storm. Following it downstream was supposed to lead to safety, but in the darkness, every shadow looked like a waiting enemy. "Hush, little one," Anna whispered to Samuel, though her own voice shook with cold and terror. "We're going to be all right. Uncle Jacob will find us soon." Uncle Jacob. The words felt strange but right on her tongue. In just a few hours, this lonely rancher had become more family to her than anyone since her mother died. The way he'd looked at her, like she mattered, like she was worth protecting, reminded her of the stories her mother used to tell about the man who'd loved her truly. A branch snapped somewhere behind her, and Anna spun around, her heart hammering. Through the rain and darkness, she could see a figure moving down the path, too far away to identify but definitely following her trail. Fear gave her fresh strength, and she pushed deeper into the canyon, following the creek's roar. The water rushed past her feet as she walked along its banks, and Anna realized with growing dread that the creek was rising fast. What had been a gentle stream earlier was now a raging torrent that could sweep away anyone foolish enough to fall in. If this was her path to safety, it was quickly becoming a trap. Samuel's crying grew weaker, and when Anna touched his forehead, she felt the heat of fever beginning. The cold and stress were making him sick, and she had no medicine, no shelter, no way to help him. Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks as she realized she might lose her son to the very freedom she'd been trying to win for him. "Anna!" A voice called through the storm. "Anna, where are you?" She froze, listening hard. Was that Jacob's voice, or one of Whitfield's remaining men? The sound seemed to come from upstream, back toward the ranch house. Anna pressed herself against a large boulder, trying to make herself invisible while she decided what to do. "It's Jacob!" The voice called again, closer now. "The men are gone. It's safe to come back." Relief flooded through Anna's body like warm honey. She opened her mouth to call back, then stopped. Something about the voice wasn't quite right. It sounded like Jacob, but the words were too smooth, too careful. The real Jacob wouldn't promise safety so easily. He was too practical, too cautious. Anna held her breath and waited. Footsteps approached her hiding spot, and through a gap in the rocks, she saw a figure with a lantern. It was definitely a man, tall and broad-shouldered like Jacob, but when the light hit his face, Anna gasped. It wasn't Jacob at all. It was Marcus Whitfield himself. The territorial governor candidate looked nothing like the polished politician she'd seen in newspaper pictures. His expensive clothes were muddy and torn. His usually perfect hair hung wet and stringy around his face, and his eyes burned with a fury that made Anna's blood freeze. This was a man who'd traveled through a dangerous storm to personally hunt down his own child. "I know you're here somewhere," Whitfield called out, his cultured voice cutting through the wind. "Crawford's dead, but he managed to tell me which way you went before he died. There's nowhere left to run, Anna." Anna hugged Samuel closer, feeling his tiny body trembling. The baby had stopped crying, but his breathing was shallow and fast. He needed warmth and medicine soon, or the fever would take him. But revealing herself to Whitfield would mean losing him forever, if the man didn't simply kill them both to protect his political career. "You don't understand what you're costing me," Whitfield continued, moving slowly down the path with his lantern. "My campaign, my reputation, everything I've worked for. All because you couldn't stay where you belonged." Anna bit her lip to keep from responding. She remembered their last conversation, when Whitfield had thrown money at her and told her to disappear. He'd called Samuel a mistake, a problem to be solved quietly. Now he was here to solve that problem permanently. Thunder crashed overhead, and in the brief moment when the sound covered her movement, Anna crept away from her hiding place. She had to reach the Morrison ranch Jacob had mentioned, had to find help for Samuel before it was too late. But the path ahead was treacherous, and Whitfield was gaining ground. As she moved carefully along the creek bank, Anna's foot caught on a loose stone. She stumbled, catching herself just before she would have fallen into the rushing water, but the noise was enough to give away her position. "There you are," Whitfield said, his lantern light finding her like a spotlight. "End of the line, my dear." Anna turned to face him, Samuel cradled in her arms. Up close, she could see the madness in Whitfield's eyes, the desperation of a man watching his carefully built life crumble. His hand rested on the grip of a pistol tucked into his belt. "Please," Anna said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "He's your son. He's sick and he needs help." Whitfield's expression didn't soften. "He's a liability," he replied coldly. "As are you. My wife has already forgiven me for the affair, but only if all evidence of it disappears permanently." "You can't mean." "I mean exactly what you think I mean," Whitfield interrupted. "A tragic accident in the storm. A young woman and her child, lost in the wilderness. No one will question it." Anna backed toward the creek, her mind racing. The water was too dangerous to cross, but Whitfield was blocking her only escape route. Samuel whimpered weakly in her arms, and she felt his fever burning through the blankets. "He'll die anyway if you don't get him help soon," Whitfield observed with chilling calm. "I'm just making it quicker." That's when Anna heard the most beautiful sound in the world, hoofbeats approaching fast through the storm. Jacob's voice rang out over the thunder, calling her name with genuine concern, not the fake sympathy Whitfield had used. "Anna, stay away from the water." Whitfield spun toward the sound, his hand moving to his gun. "Persistent old fool," he muttered. "I should have had Crawford kill him first." "Jacob helped us because he's a good man," Anna said, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "Something you'll never understand." "Goodness is a luxury I can't afford," Whitfield replied, drawing his pistol. "Not when I'm this close to the governor's mansion." The hoofbeats were getting closer, and Anna could see Jacob's lantern bobbing through the trees upstream. But Whitfield raised his gun, taking careful aim at the approaching light. Anna realized with horror that he intended to ambush Jacob, to kill the only man who could help them. Without thinking, Anna lunged forward and grabbed Whitfield's gun arm, throwing off his aim just as he fired. The shot went wide, but the sudden movement sent both of them staggering toward the creek's edge. Anna felt her feet sliding on the muddy bank, felt gravity pulling her toward the deadly rushing water. Samuel's cry pierced the night as Anna fought to keep her balance, his small voice giving her the strength to push away from Whitfield and scramble back from the creek. But the politician wasn't finished with her yet. "Enough," Whitfield snarled, raising the gun again. "This ends now." Jacob's rifle cracked like thunder just as Whitfield's finger tightened on the trigger, and the would-be governor spun sideways, his shot going wild into the stormy darkness. The man crashed into the creek bank and rolled, clutching his shoulder, his expensive clothes now ruined beyond repair. "Drop the gun," Jacob commanded, sliding down from his horse with his rifle still trained on the wounded politician. His voice carried the authority of a man who'd seen too much violence to hesitate when it mattered most. Anna collapsed to her knees, exhaustion and relief overwhelming her in equal measure. Samuel had gone quiet in her arms, too quiet, and when she touched his forehead, the fever burned like fire against her palm. "Jacob," she gasped. "Samuel's really sick. We need to get him warm and dry." Jacob's eyes flicked between Whitfield, who was still conscious and dangerous despite his wound, and the baby who might not survive much longer in the storm. The choice was clear, but executing it would require perfect timing and a bit of luck. "Can you ride?" Jacob asked Anna, nodding toward his horse. "I think so," Anna replied, though her legs felt like water. "Whitfield," Jacob called out, his rifle never wavering. "Your boy is dying while you play politician. Is your campaign really worth watching your own son suffer? The wounded man looked up from where he'd fallen, rain streaming down his face. For just a moment, something human flickered in his eyes as he watched Anna struggle to comfort the fevering child. He's not really mine, Whitfield said finally. I barely knew the girl. It was just a mistake. Mistake or not, he's here now, Jacob replied. And he's innocent in all this. Anna watched this exchange with growing understanding. Jacob wasn't just talking to Whitfield, he was talking to himself, working through his own feelings about suddenly discovering he had a daughter and grandson. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Two men faced with unexpected family, but only one willing to step up and accept the responsibility. My political career, Whitfield began, will survive or it won't, Jacob interrupted. But that boy won't survive the night if we don't get him help. What kind of man lets a child die for politics? Thunder rolled overhead, and the rain began falling even harder. Jacob made his decision, slinging his rifle over his shoulder and moving toward Anna. We're leaving, he announced. Whitfield, you can come with us and face whatever comes, or you can sit here in the mud and think about what kind of legacy you want to leave. Jacob helped Anna onto his horse, then swung up behind her. She leaned back against his solid presence, feeling safer than she had since this nightmare began. Samuel stirred weakly in her arms, and she whispered soothing words her mother had once used to comfort her during childhood fevers. Where are we going? Anna asked as Jacob guided the horse back up the canyon path. Pete Morrison's place, Jacob replied. His wife Sarah was a midwife before they moved out here. She'll know what to do for Samuel. They rode in silence through the storm, Jacob's arms around Anna as he controlled the reins, both of them focused on the precious cargo between them. Behind them, Anna could hear Whitfield struggling to his feet, but she didn't look back. Whatever the politician decided to do now was his choice. She had more important things to worry about. The Morrison ranch appeared through the rain like a beacon, its windows glowing with warm yellow light. Jacob called out as they approached, and an elderly man emerged from the house with a shotgun, relaxing when he recognized his neighbor. Jacob, what in blazes are you doing out in this weather? Pete Morrison demanded. Medical emergency, Jacob replied, dismounting and helping Anna down. The baby's got fever, and Anna here is near frozen through. Sarah Morrison, a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair, appeared in the doorway and immediately took charge. Bring them inside, she ordered. Pete, get some dry clothes and blankets. Jacob, stoke up that fire. Within minutes, Anna found herself wrapped in a warm quilt by the Morrisons' fireplace while Sarah examined Samuel with gentle, experienced hands. The older woman's face was serious but not panicked, which Anna took as a good sign. He's definitely fevering, Sarah confirmed. But his breathing is steady and his color's not too bad. This looks like exposure and stress more than anything serious. A few days of warmth, proper food, and rest should set him right. Anna burst into tears. Not from sadness, but from pure relief. Samuel was going to be okay. Everything she'd endured, every risk she'd taken, had been worth it to hear those words. Jacob knelt beside her chair, his weathered hand covering hers. It's over, he said simply. You're both safe now. What about Whitfield? Anna asked. He won't just give up. Maybe not, Jacob admitted. But he's got bigger problems now than chasing after you. Word will get out about what happened tonight, about him sending armed men after his own child. That kind of scandal ends political careers permanent-like. Pete Morrison cleared his throat from across the room. Speaking of which, there's something you folks should know. A federal marshal rode through here yesterday, asking questions about Whitfield. Seems there's been allegations about campaign fraud, bribery, that sort of thing. Man's already in hot water without adding attempted kidnapping to the list. Anna felt the last knot of fear loosen in her chest. Whitfield's threats had lost their power. He was fighting for his own survival now, not hunting her and Samuel. So what happens next? Anna asked, looking between Jacob and the Morrisons. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, His voice was soft but certain. "I've been alone for 3 years," he said. "Thought that's how I wanted it, how it had to be. But having you and Samuel at the ranch, it felt like home again." Anna studied his face in the firelight, seeing past the beard and the weathered skin to the man her mother had loved. "Are you asking us to stay?" "I'm asking if you want to," Jacob replied. "It won't be easy. Ranch life is hard, especially in winter. And there'll be talk in town about us not being properly married." Anna surprised herself by laughing. "After everything we've been through, you're worried about gossip?" "I'm worried about you having regrets," Jacob said seriously. "About you feeling trapped again." Anna looked down at Samuel, who was sleeping peacefully in Sarah Morrison's arms, his fever already beginning to break. Then she looked back at Jacob, this man who'd risked his life for strangers, who'd offered them shelter without asking for anything in return. "My mother spent 15 years regretting the choice she made to leave you," Anna said quietly. "I don't intend to make the same mistake." Jacob's face lit up with the first genuine smile Anna had seen from him. "Then I guess we'd better start planning a wedding," he said. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to ease, and Anna could see the first hints of dawn touching the eastern sky. It had been the longest night of her life, but also the most important. She'd found her father, saved her son, and discovered that sometimes the best family is the one you choose to build together. As Sarah Morrison handed Samuel back to his mother, the baby opened his eyes and looked straight at Jacob. His tiny hand reached out, and Jacob offered his finger, which Samuel grasped with surprising strength. "Well," Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion, "I reckon that settles it. Welcome home, Samuel. Welcome home."